So, good evening, and I expect that you were getting all organized for the holiday period, whether you're celebrating or not. This is a time when, obviously, since my audience is mainly in Western Europe, North and South America, that people are preparing for the Christmas holidays. You might have some other holidays you're celebrating, but in any case, you're probably going to catch up with your loved ones, people close to you, family over this period. So I, as well, am getting ready for that. I'm actually at my Estonian buddy's place this evening again, keeping these live streams in a quieter environment than I had previously, taking on board your feedback. So planning a little bit of a Christmas dinner in the next few days. Actually going to have some Ukrainian girlfriends also over to celebrate, girls that I've met here in Estonia. I'll comment a little bit about that also during this live stream, what the scene is like here in Estonia. Got on the Slava Ukraini t-shirt this evening. And today's live stream is about the Ukrainian bride business. So I'm going to comment on a bit of a beef that seems to be going on between two of the protagonists in that industry, namely Match Guaranty and Heart Rocket. These are two matchmakers that have been based in Ukraine before the 2022 invasion. They've since both relocated. I've actually met both of them in person many years ago. It's been a long time since I met either of them in person, but I have back in the day, both in Kyiv and in Odessa. So I'll be commenting about their beef a little bit and why I think they're having this beef. It's kind of interesting because I made some reaction videos, especially back about 2 years ago. I made a prediction about the end of the Ukrainian bride business as a mass industry. Of course, it can still continue like as a boutique industry, a niche, a very small niche, relative to what it was in the past. Like all matchmaking, I mean, you can have matchmaking anywhere, right? It's not that specific to Ukraine, but it was a massive business in terms of the marketing behind it. And there was a lot of scam industries. That was probably even the main part of it. And that has been on the decline. I made this prediction 2 years ago, so I'll discuss that a little bit. Also, I'm curious to see how many guys that show up to these live streams, watch my content, are actually even interested in matchmaking, the Ukrainian bride business. I have made videos with Yelena, I think it's like one a year, basically, where I ask her some questions like an interview about what is going on with that industry. And those videos, they tend to perform pretty well, actually, relative to the the overall content on the channels. It's getting interesting for me to see how many guys are actually interested in me even commenting on it. I haven't made any sort of reaction video, I think, for maybe it's not quite a year, but it's probably not far off at this point. And yeah, I'll also comment on the main issue and contention in their little dispute online, their contretemps, and how erroneous I think basically both of their advices on that particular point. And I'll also outline the myriad of problems with this Ukrainian bride fetish that they obviously pitch to their clients in that sense, and to show you what works better in terms of meeting sincere, beautiful women that probably going to be a better match for you in the long run. And it's actually something that both of these guys did themselves, not what they sell with the matchmaking, but actually what they did themselves, which I find the most curious thing about both of their channels is that they basically pitch something that didn't work for them and they do something different, which is obviously closer to what I advise my clients in terms of doing in general, the content on my channel, especially in the last 3 years, as I've been helping my clients with the alternatives to Ukraine. So if you're new to this channel, maybe you just saw the two names in the title and you were more interested in their content before, maybe the Ukrainian bride business, what your content and the content that you've been consuming in some shape and form, and you maybe haven't been watching content with respect to Ukraine or dating for a long time. Maybe it's only just pretty recently. My name is Connor Klein. I help high-level men with living their dream lifestyle in a region that I call New Europe. The reason I call it New Europe because calling it Eastern Europe doesn't really fit anymore, especially since a lot of the guys were moving to Poland, and Poland is in Central Europe. And Eastern Europe, it's kind of really the way it's used is a Cold War term referring to the countries that were behind the Iron Curtain. And that was 35 years ago today, actually. The dictator of Romania, Ceausescu, he gave his, I guess, infamous speech where he thought everything was fine. He's, we're going to raise salaries, everything, the economy is going great, and people started to boo him, and then that precipitated a revolution as part of those anti-communist revolutions that took place in late 1989. Eventually, he was actually executed by a kangaroo court in the weeks that followed, and Romania had a little bit of actually civil war at the time. I see one of my consultant clients writing, where did I get the t-shirt? I actually bought this t-shirt in Odessa Mama. And bought it there. The person who wrote me just in text, we can discuss it afterwards. I'll pick one up for you next time I'm back in Odessa. I'm actually currently in Tallinn in Estonia, obviously, at the moment. So yeah, these countries that I call New Europe, they're in between Russia and Germany. They're the countries that don't want to be in Russia's sphere of influence, basically, where the new Cold War is, obviously, it's become clearer and clearer that we are in the early stages of a new Cold War. We'll see how history works out, obviously, in due course, but that Iron Curtain is basically, it's been reestablished to a certain extent. Also in the early Cold War, it wasn't so clear that we were going to be in one and where the border would be and all that stuff. So we're kind of in a similar phase, it looks like now, and Eastern Europe, as I call it, it's like on the other side, where basically Russian countries that are in Russia's sphere of influence, still that you could call maybe Eastern Europe. But over here on this side, because I'm not so far away from Russia actually at the moment, being in Tallinn, it's a neighboring country. It doesn't really fit, and it's not very helpful if you actually come here or you're, obviously this is going to discuss dating, this live stream. If you're dating women from this region, whether they happen to be Ukrainian or they happen to be from the Baltics, like Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, Moldova, other countries, Hungarian, it's not a very helpful term to conceive it like that. So that's why I use that term. And I basically help guys with living their dream lifestyle here. And a lot of that also pertains to dating, because most of my clients, they start off at least single. The guy actually wrote me. He is actually engaged. He has a Ukrainian fiancée, and he's looking at getting residency in Ukraine and buying real estate there at the moment. So that might also be relevant to some guys on the topic. So basically, that is who I am. There are a series of links down below in the description to this live stream that if you're new to my content, you should definitely go and check out. I've actually put together a playlist for all my reaction videos and interviews pertaining to the Ukrainian bride business, the whole matchmaking. Maybe derogatorily it's been referred to as the Ukrainian mail order bride business, but it's a complete misnomer. No one was ever mailing brides abroad, but I guess that's kind of a negative way to look at it. But I have a series of reaction videos, so if you're new and you haven't watched that previous content, it'll probably be pretty useful for you to get my perspective, as I am not a matchmaker, but I have helped out lots of guys, in particular through my consulting. And there's also a link to that, of course, down below in the description of the videos. Go check out that. And probably the most pertinent is the last interview I did on my channel with a matchmaker, Yelena, who actually helped one of my clients. One of the reasons I interview her back in the day in Odessa, and he's actually married to the woman that she matched him with. And that's giving you an update on the state of affairs with the Ukrainian bride business. That's actually the last interviews down below in the description. I'll probably go and check that one out. I've also done some interviews with Belarusian matchmaker from back in the day. Obviously, I don't go to Belarus anymore with this new Cold War that has developed, and the even before, I think, early 2020. It's almost been 5 years since I was last in Belarus, but that's probably also interesting for you to get that perspective as well. Check all that. It's out down below. It's in the playlist, and also you'll see the video there for the last interview. I also gave an interview for another channel. I will reference that a few times, probably in this presentation as well, for another channel called, it's in French, The Matchmaker. So unless you speak French, probably not going to be so interested. But if you do, Antoine from CQMI Agence de Rencontre, based in Canada and Quebec. Worth checking out. I give some interviews there, and I actually enjoy his content. He's the only matchmaker whose content I actually watch because he does have some interesting perspectives, also on the geopolitical situation that does affect this this industry as well. And yeah, I don't watch regularly the two channels that I'm going to comment on. In preparation for this live stream, I went, and from my point of view, I suffered through their content for a few hours at double speed, because for me, and obviously I'm not the target demographic of their content, since I'm not looking to marry a Ukrainian. I already have a Ukrainian girlfriend, a long-term girlfriend, anyways, that I met by living in Ukraine, which we're going to reference later. But I don't see really too much of interest there. But on Antoine's, I actually enjoy watching it. I actually watched it quite a bit, so I find that content. But as I said, it's in French, so you'll probably have to deal with the language barrier unless you do that. Gary comments that he also he suffers through their content, but maybe you don't suffer through. Maybe you're more you do get some value from it. You can write that as well. So as I'm going through this presentation, I'm going to give now about the different topics to do with the two of them. These two matchmakers. You can drop comments down below, ask me questions. I will come to those in the Q&A after I give a presentation. I will try to be succinct. That's why I actually wrote down some notes for this live stream. It doesn't drag on too long. And yeah, I guess if you want to dive in deep into any of the topics that are raised during this live stream, then down below is my consulting link, and we can hop on a call and discuss them in depth. I actually have done that with some of their clients. I should probably also say that as well, since people have come to me over the years who have been clients of theirs. So I actually got a fair idea what goes on behind the scenes, and also what kind of women that they try to match these guys from. So that's kind of the overview and the parameters. And yeah, what is, if you're new to Ukrainian bride business, what the hell am I talking about? Because for people who are not actually exposed to this content, a lot of time they just think, does this really exist? They have negative associations with it because of the concept like Thai mail order brides, and I think it's just a Ukrainian version of that, that suddenly they're looking at a catalog and ordering a woman to be imported and then to be married in that kind of format. That's not what we're talking about. That would be hyperbole to describe it like that. What we're talking about is matchmaking. So basically what you have is an agency, a matchmaker that will have female clients that will come to them who normally don't pay, although some of the agencies actually get women to pay. Yellen, who interviewed, that's what she told me she does. And basically then men, usually men from more socioeconomically developed countries, they pay quite a considerable fee, looking at the fee schedules of these two agencies at least, in order to be introduced to those women. So basically I put the concept like this. Concept is that men, and in particular men in North America, because that seems to be where most of the clients these two agencies are from, looking at how they describe their clients. So Canada and obviously the US, not exclusively, but that in general is maybe a little bit the UK as well. They want to import a wife from a poorer country. That's basically how it works. And the woman is probably coming from a country where they cannot emigrate so easily to North America or to Canada. Used to be more common with Western Europe. And the guys in general, obviously they're not happy with what they have locally in North America or wherever they're living. Can obviously, oh, got something in my throat here. I did eat some peanuts just before, so maybe some of it got stuck in my throat. It's kind of a bit weird. Excuse me. All right, so whatever. I think a little bit of the peanut is stuck in my throat there. So basically, the women are coming from countries that are socioeconomically underdeveloped. They don't have normally rights to just emigrate to the US or to Western Europe or to Japan or wherever the clients happen to be, or maybe it's the Middle East as well. And then they attempt to do that through marriage, basically. That's normally the big incentive. So what you traditionally see is like countries like obviously Thailand is one of the most kind of most commonly known, but can be from Latin America, so Southeast Asia, Latin America, and we'll say, well, it used to be referred as Eastern Europe. So that would have been like Belarus, Ukraine, maybe Russia back in the day. But most of what we're going to focus on is obviously Ukraine, since we're talking about the Ukrainian bride business. And I remember about 15 years ago, there was actually a lot of it going on with Russia, but then Russia fell out of favor. I remember Ukraine made it actually visa-free for the guys to come from the US, from Western Europe to Ukraine, while Russia obviously kept visas in place. And I'm not sure if that was a lot to do with it, but it seemed like this whole traditional bride from Eastern Europe, it started to focus almost exclusively on Ukraine, and there was a lot of money involved. So for people who aren't exposed to this content, they must be thinking, well, why would anyone really want to pay for such a service to meet Ukrainian women? We live in the world of online dating. I think the stat in the US is, just one second, let me close that. The stat in the US is 51% of couples meet through online dating, and obviously we have all these dating apps. You can even do on Tinder and all this kind of stuff. You can put the passport option, which lets you swipe on the app as if you were actually in the location. So you could just change your location app to Kyiv. Obviously, we're probably talking pre-2022 invasion, and then you can meet the same women. Why would anyone need this option of using a matchmaker? Well, normally it's because the guys probably tried that or are unaware of that they could actually just do that, and it's a small fee, and they normally feel a big time constraint. That's one of the big things. Having talked to many of the guys, they're impatient, I would say. It's not necessarily that they are always older, in the sense I'm 46, that they're older than me, but a lot of times they're guys who are impatient. So they don't want to take the time. They believe that going to a matchmaker will streamline that for them, because they'll say, oh, here you can meet X, Y, Z woman, and she's going to be a great match for you. Of course, that's presumably what they will say. And then they have their date set up, and either they do them remotely, which has become more common because of this invasion and the situation in Ukraine, or before they were flying in to Ukraine and they were meeting these women in person. So what would be the incentive for the women to be there? Normally it is women who are looking for immigration, because that is almost a prerequisite. Not so many of these guys who go to a matchmaker are actually interested in living in the region. Obviously, I'm going to talk a little bit about that as an option later on in this presentation. And because of that, then the women inevitably then almost certainly have to be open to immigrating to where the guy is from. In general, that's going to be North America, not exclusively, but in general. So they are women that basically, that is the big attraction. They would meet an American, they would leave Ukraine, and they would go live in the United States, in America, as I like to say. They have this image normally that America is going to be a better option for them. Also, they are normally women that don't have particularly attractive options on their local scene. And quite often that's because they're over 30 years of age and already have kids. So they're normally divorced, have one, the fertility rate is quite low in Ukraine. So normally they have one child, but sometimes they might have two. And they're divorced. Divorce rate in Ukraine is extremely high. It's also extremely high in that part of the region. So also in Belarus, Russia, Moldova, countries like that, it is over 50%. So there are a lot of women who find themselves over 30, divorced, have 1 to 2 children, and that makes them relatively unattractive to the Ukrainian guys, because, well, they would have to invest in another man's offspring, and the woman is already over 30. And for women in general, they normally peak on the dating market between 20 and 25. Those guys were first attracted by women visually normally, and once a woman is over 30, that is harder for her to be as attractive as she was between 20 and 25. It's not exclusive. It doesn't mean every single woman's falls off a cliff or hits the wall and all this kind of stuff that you see a lot in the red pill content. But as a generalization, it becomes harder for women. So they probably have very poor local dating options. they're open to immigration, and that is why they would go there. I often refer to them as green card girls because obviously once they get to US, that would be a big priority to get a green card. And that is something, I'll address that, why green card girls are an issue for guys who go to a matchmaker, or just in general, even if you meet a Ukrainian or another woman from the region, you have a long-term relationship, maybe marriage, and then you move her back to whether it's Western Europe or North or South America. Some of the long-term issues you can have if immigration was her main priority for being interested in you. That is something that causes problems. So with the invasion in 2022, these two matchmakers that I'm going to deal with their beef now shortly, they both left. I think actually Match Guarantee, they left just before the invasion. They were a little bit better organized and took the warnings from the US intelligence a lot more seriously. And Hard Rocket, they had a series of vlogs, if I remember correctly, when they were leaving. So they got caught in the trauma of actually evacuating with a lot of other people who've been stuck on the border, and they had that documented on their channel. So neither of them, as far as I know, I don't think they've ever been back to Ukraine since, and they're now based abroad. So that is them. And in general, since I made that prediction 2 years ago that basically matchmaking as a mass industry focused in Ukraine is more or less over. I think I put that on the thumbnail. It's over. Most of the other players in that industry, there are a lot of other bigger, or that were bigger, matchmakers or marriage agencies. They have pivoted to other regions. Mainly they are focusing on Latin America or Southeast Asia, even some of them on Africa now I see. And one of the main reasons for that is not only is it obviously not as safe to go to Ukraine, but if you remember what I said about the women having a problem, finding people to emigrate, that is no longer the case with Ukrainians. With a Ukrainian passport, assuming you can get out of the country, which is women are allowed to leave. Men need permission to leave if they are military age, so between 18 and 60, but women can leave. And so, it might be, there's maybe a bit more complicated if they have a child, but in general, they can leave, and they were allowed leave at the beginning of the invasion, and they can live anywhere in the European Union. It's pretty easy for them to move to the US relative to other nationalities. There are a few options on that. Also for Canada, although now that I think that program in Canada is suspended until a new one will be created. But I think there was like close to 1 million Ukrainians who applied for Canadian visas. It's like enormous. I don't think so many went, but they can basically emigrate without needing to get married nowadays. I mean, of course, if they had a husband, it would be presumably easier to move and to integrate, and obviously in terms of a support network, but it's pretty simple for them to emigrate and live in Western Europe for sure, and that is obviously a lot closer to Ukraine without the need for any sort of marriage or anything like that. And I think that removes obviously a huge incentive for Ukrainian women to sign up to a matchmaker. I think that's pretty clear, and you've seen the other competitors of these two matchmakers pivot quite clearly away from Ukraine. There's still a little bit of content. I looked at their channels in preparation for this where they talk about Ukraine a little bit, and I think one of them organized a romance tour, it seemed, back here, or I want to say back here in the region. They actually did it in Kyiv in spite of the war and the active bombing of Kyiv. You probably started in the week where there was a big rocket attack by Russia on Ukraine, hit some buildings right in the center of Kyiv, and tragically more civilians were killed. But this is something that happens in the war, with Russia having committed thousands of war crimes and on so forth. So let me just deal with why they were having a little bit of a beef. It was kind of funny to sit through a lot of their content over the last week at double speed, trying to get a sense of what they're talking about. But basically, Match Guarantee claims that if you date more than, and they say date, I mean even communicate with, from what I understand, more than one woman at the same time through the matchmaking process, then you will be labeled a sex tourist by the Ukrainian women. And Hard Rocket claims that you need to be speaking to several women at the same time in order to decide which is going to be the best option for you. To kind of simplify, I mean, they had a very long retort in terms of the explanation, a bit convoluted, but basically that's it. So that you will be able to pick the best of several, and you need to be speaking to several at the same time. And they implicitly reject that accusation that it's sex tourism, and that you would get labeled as a sex tourist as a result. So let me explain, if you've never maybe been to Ukraine. There was a big prejudice against or stereotype about guys coming from the US, from Western Europe, basically from abroad, from maybe not if you were Polish or from somewhere nearby, but if you were coming from a long way away, that you were a guy who was primarily there to chase skirt. And that can be in several forms. There was a certain amount of sex tourism. Sex tourism, according to the UN definition, is like traveling for commercial sex. So it's basically paying for prostitution. Might also include going to something like a strip club, I guess, if you were to expand that out. But a lot of people probably misuse that term to mean like basically traveling and hoping to meet women, right? I think that's in general, hoping to have some romance. I mean, I think romance tourism would probably be a better way to describe it. But the implicit underlying prejudice was that the guy cannot meet women back home, so he's desperate to come over to Ukraine. In this example, can be obviously going to Thailand or Mexico or Colombia. Colombia is another one. So they can't get women back home. They're kind of losers back home. I saw some of those comments sometimes under other videos I did years ago in Ukraine. And as a result, they basically have to come to Ukraine where they might have a chance because they don't have any options at home. That obviously makes guys who get labeled like that look very low value. Obviously, if you're traveling for prostitution and that kind of stuff and you get labeled like that, that's even worse in terms of how you will be judged in terms of your value. And basically, that's kind of why they've started to have a bit of a beef back and forth, it seems. And the bottom line is, if they're arguing about things like that and that Match Guaranty is trying to pick fights with Hard Rocket, it's probably a sign of declining returns on the Ukrainian bride business in general. That's kind of my assumption. You also tried to pick beefs with me in the past to try and remain, I guess, relevant or be more relevant, and hopefully pilfer a few people who will be watching this channel. A few clients. He was always trying to be in the comments as well, pitching people. So that's kind of my assumption, that things are not going so well. Someone else who's a former client of his said he got an email from him last week. He's the person commenting was also a consulting client of mine who has since met someone to be in a long-term relationship by doing what I'm going to reveal in a minute. So let me just talk a little bit about this topic because I think it is interesting. A lot of guys are under the maybe false impression that if they are seeing many women at the same time or talking to many people, that's going to be a problem. The woman would think, oh, he's maybe not maybe a player, right? I think that's probably a better term than sex tourist. That just seems weird to me to try and label it that way. But I think it's more that you'd be seen as a player. If you only focus on one woman, there is a huge danger that you end up with what's known in the manosphere, and actually even Hard Rocket referenced this in their retort video, the response video, that you get basically with one-itis. This is a term that you see that a guy gets so focused on one woman that he can't see anything else, and he invests all his energy, all his attention. And the problem with that is, I think the guy mistakenly believes that by putting so much focus that he's going to increase his chances, the woman's really going to appreciate how special she is to him. Unfortunately, the reality is that basically he comes off normally as very needy, and in fact, by pedestalizing, that's term, the woman, that she starts to see him as lower value, because implicit in that is that he doesn't have other options, and he's actually created that situation of not having other options by focusing on just one woman. It's almost implicit. At least that's the way it's going to come off. I think both of them miss the real crux of the issue, which is that you need to, there's a concept in evolutionary biology, and it's called mate copying choice. So, obviously we have science and people try to do increasingly more rigorous research to understand how men and women react in relationships. We have it's a bit like hypergamy. It's also a cross-cultural phenomenon where it's also important to understand what hypergamy is. It's like the trend across the globe, basically, that women tend to date or partner across and up in socioeconomic hierarchies, while men implicitly they mate across and down. And that means that if you're going to a country that's poor in general, that's the economic part, then you'll be able to satisfy that criterion a lot easier than maybe you can in the US. Depends obviously where you are in terms of socioeconomic hierarchy. It's not entirely about money, it's also social status. It also plays into it, and that's something that we see. So that's another reason why maybe moving to another place, especially if you have a remote income or you're independent wealthy, can actually be a big boost for you. And it can also be if you're doing a matchmaking or trying to date virtually as well with someone from somewhere else. So make coupling choices basically like women are more likely to be attracted to a man who already has other women around him in his life, right? That is what it is in a sense. It's also known as pre-selection a little bit more in the manosphere as a concept. And, they do a lot of studies also with other primates, like they take a male monkey and they put female monkeys around them, and they try to judge how interested they are. And then they put like a female or a representation of a female beside the male, and they see the reaction. Suddenly in these studies, the female monkeys are all more interested in the male monkey now that they see another female around them. So that's what we can tell. And I also read some of the other research to do with humans on it. And basically, the explanation given is that it's more efficient for women to allow other women to do the research for them, right? So they don't know if it takes a certain amount of investment of time and resources to figure out whether the guy is going to be a good match or not, right? A good long-term partner, be able to presumably provide for offspring. And if another woman has already done that vetting for you, then you can copy that choice and basically free ride off her investment and time. And that's why, at least that's the explanation given us why women are implicitly going to be more attracted to men that already have women around them who seem interested. When I read the research, having women that are attractive around you is actually what is important, or a woman that's presumably more attractive looking than the woman who's making that decision. So that's really the key that I think guys should get out of this, is like you need to have some sort of, or it's better to have some sort of demonstration that other women are interested in you. The main way that you can do that nowadays, especially if you're doing things remotely, is through Instagram. Instagram is an amazing platform for demonstrating your value. Actually, my friend who's here, my Estonian buddy, he's recently, when did you get divorced?
Like 2 years ago.
2 years ago, but then you were in a relationship most of the time pretty soon afterwards, right? So he just came out of a relationship that he had immediately after his divorce, very soon after his divorce. And he's like been completely amazed by Instagram and how he never knew anything about it when I showed him how to use it. Because then you can be demonstrating your lifestyle, and part of that can be just the fact that you also hang out or have other women in your life that then demonstrates that you're not a loser back home and don't have any other options. So I think they kind of missed both of them in their little spat online. The main thing about dating other women, or they weren't even dating other women, they're just talking about talking to other women. Like dating other women means you're having a relationship with them, which again would be a demonstration of pre-selection in general. But you need to be communicating that. So that's the first thing. Instagram is amazing. I deal with that other videos on the channel. Most of the guys that come to me as clients, they don't understand how powerful Instagram is. A lot of them think that dating apps or social media is terrible. Well, it's only terrible if you don't utilize it properly. I think just online dating in general is not great overall. I will agree with that, but that includes obviously the matchmakers. It's going to be an inferior choice, in my opinion, as opposed to meeting people in real life. So that is the first thing, is that you need to, by being able to utilize pre-selection, it really improve your chances with finding the right women for you, because women are just going to see you as higher value in general. That's what the research says. And then, of course, if you're focused on just one person all the time, and you're at a matchmaker, which already implicitly means, it's the underlying implicit thing, is that you don't have good options back home. Otherwise, you wouldn't be trying to date a woman in another country that you don't even live in. And never mind the fact that they're probably aware that you have to pay a significant amount of money for the matchmaker in order to do that. You definitely don't want to come off as having one choice to the one woman that you're talking to, because that is definitely risks that you get one-itis and you just implicitly look lower value. So that's what I'll say about that. My just overall impression was that the market for the Ukrainian bride business is reducing all the time. They are, both of them, they seem to be both pivoting, but the only thing that surprises me from when I made my prediction 2 years ago is the fact that they've kind of kept the branding of Ukrainian brides, even though they seem to be actually trying to match their clients with women who are a lot of time not Ukrainian. I did talk to the other two matchmakers, obviously the one I gave an interview for, Antoine, he seems to have Ukrainian women. Also, Yana told me she has nearly all Ukrainian women, but I watched about Hard Rocket's response video, and they seem to be saying women were from all over now, even Central Asia, which, I mean, I like Central Asia, so it's probably a good choice. But that makes sense to me. They seem to use the terms interchangeably, like Ukrainian, suddenly it's Slavic women, and then suddenly it's Eastern European women. Well, are they Ukrainian or are they from Russia? Are they from somewhere else? Because it makes a lot more sense to me if they were from Russia, because Russians can't emigrate easily, so they have a need maybe to be to find a guy to be able to emigrate somewhere else. The economic situation is going to be increasingly difficult there. It's already, I mean, if you follow what's going on in Russia at all, it's been, they're basically facing huge economic problems next year. So it'll be interesting. Anyways, let me move on and just briefly talk about some of the issues that guys who've come to me for help in the past have faced when they've been lured into this world of matchmaking, whether for the better or for the worse. And I have met guys who've met their wives through matchmaking. I'm not saying that you can't meet someone. I just get the impression there's most guys have at least who come to me, the overwhelming majority of them have a very poor experience. So let's say first problem is scamming. That isn't necessarily to do with these two matchmakers at all, but basically pay per letter, which is when you're paying for communication. So typically what happens, there are these sites that market the traditional Ukrainian brides, show lots of photos of very beautiful women. If you start, then you have to buy credits typically to communicate with them. In general, you will not be communicating with any of those women in real life. That is the experience. My girlfriend Angela is still occasionally pitched for offers to have the rights to use her photos on these kind of sites. A lot less than 5 years ago, when there was probably a lot more marketing dollars put behind Ukrainian traditional brides. I think it's gone a little bit out of fashion, it seems, also with this Russo-Ukrainian war and the invasion in 2022. But if you are paying, I'm just going to make it very simple for guys who maybe are new to my content. If you are paying for communication, that means you pay to write, to call, to receive videos, to open emoticons or whatever, you need to stop it because the chances of it being real are extremely, extremely slim. I've never had a guy come to me on a consulting call who paid for communication who had any success. I had one guy tell me that on a site that did also do PPL, pay per letter, that his colleague had met his wife on that site. But that was the only time I ever heard of anything good ever happening, right? So you also then had romance tour girls. You had this setup where they would throw like kind of a social event. They called it a social, and often there were a lot of women there who would go to target. I'm not talking about these two matchmakers. I'm talking about the industry in general. So they would target guys at this, and then they would basically get them to buy them stuff all the time on the pretext that they were in a relationship. But there was a lot of scamming going on. They would do the restaurant scam. They would get the guy to bring them to a restaurant. They'd be getting a kickback from the restaurant, all these kind of scams. So the first big problem is that was maybe an issue in general in Ukraine back in the day, and other countries like Russia also was a problem when we went there in St. Petersburg. You had a lot of scamming. Second big issue is, as I referenced, in general, in spite of the stopping 51% of couples in the US now meeting online, from what I can see at this point in time, the heyday of online dating is already over. Maybe it'll come back up again, but that's also to talk about dating apps, whether it's Bumble or Tinder, matchmaking. I'll give you an example that kind of illustrated it to me. I had a conversation a few times. I actually gave a live stream on another channel about dating in the US. I'll explain with fire. It was maybe 2.5 years ago. I remember in our conversation, I pointed out that from what I can see, the most desirable women do not meet men online. It is very, very rare that they're meeting men online because they already have a lot of options. And he was a bit skeptical, but then he went in Miami and he stopped the most beautiful women that he could see who were in a relationship and asked them on camera, okay, so how did you meet your boyfriend, your husband? And almost none of them said online. It was like, I think it was like somewhere just over 10% actually met online, in spite of the national average being 51%. That's because for people who have options, they don't really see the benefit investing a lot of time online. So just in general, the fact that you are doing online dating, it's going to be almost certainly inferior to meeting people in real life. And obviously, there are certain, you're going to invest time to do that. And it's very easy to sit there just swiping or going on a dating site and, looking at photos. And you obviously also risk real world rejection, right? As someone telling you no, as opposed to they just don't swipe back or don't agree to meet you. Maybe that's part of the attraction. So yeah, the people you're going to meet online, there's also research that I referenced in another video I did last year when I was in Chisinau. It was American research. It says on average, you meet people who are 2 points out of 10 lower online than you do in real life in terms of dating option. That's what the stats say. So basically, just overall meeting online, it's an inferior option. Doesn't mean it never works, ever, obviously. But in general, that's a big issue. Probably the biggest issue with these matchmakers is the green card girl phenomenon. It's to do with the kind of women that go to matchmakers, international matchmakers. The big incentive is immigration. And the problem is that once she gets that green card, is she going to see the guy that she was matched with as superfluous to requirements? And that is a big risk. Anecdotally, having talked to clients of many matchmakers, and one in particular, because he was in a group in Canada, of Canadian men who had met women from Poland, married women from Ukraine, from Russia. He had actually met a Russian woman through a matchmaker. And he told me that after the woman got residency, 80% of the marriages ended. And that wasn't just the guys who met at matchmakers, also guys who met organically. But if the big incentive apparently is moving to Canada or the US or Britain, wherever it happens to be, once they have residency, that changes the dynamics quite considerably, especially because on average, women from this region, whether it's Ukraine or Russia or Moldova or somewhere, they're way better looking on average than the women that are in North America. And as a result, they're going to be looking around and realize over the years that they're there waiting for their green card that they have a lot of more options than probably they have back home. And the temptation to monkey branch, which is basically they kind of use this guy to get the US and now they're in the market where they have a lot more options, is going to be very high. Doesn't mean everyone's going to be like that. Of course, if you have a strong emotional connection, then the marriage can last. But his stat was 80% failed. I had another client who told me an anecdote about going with his friend. His friend was using these matchmakers back in the day. This is like before 2010, so it's quite a long time ago. And he married two women. The friend of my client, one from Russia, one from Ukraine, on these matchmakers, and he quipped that the best sex was the sex in the 3 months before she got the green card, and then they both divorced him. So he eventually married an Asian woman who already had a green card, and they're still together. So not through a matchmaker, he met in real life, so that was a better option for him. So I would say that's one of the big things. The other thing is, of course, the fetish about the traditional values. Ukrainian women in general, to simplify it, they're less financially emancipated than women in America. That's pretty clear. They're less focused on their career. Maybe that's considered a bit more traditional. I guess it is. But things like divorce, sex before marriage, fertility rate, none of these things are particularly traditional. The fertility rate in the region is very low, like it is in a lot of Europe. It's like normally women have 1 to 2 children. They're not, they don't have big families traditionally. Sex before marriage is extremely common. Not that's good or bad. I'm just saying that maybe that would be seen as traditional, that women are, virgins on the marriage day, whatever. You don't really have that as a phenomenon, which you do in other countries that are really more traditional and more conservative. And the divorce rate is higher than in North America or in Western Europe. It shocks most guys that are listening to all this traditional value stuff or are attracted by it, but that's the reality. It's over 50%. It's even higher in Russia now, especially in the last 2 years, apparently, from what I read as well. It's even gone higher than 60%, apparently. But we're dealing with Ukraine here. So, yeah, there's very little social stigma with getting divorced. Divorce is extremely common. So if you're going to move someone from a society where divorce is very common and move them to a place where family law, because family law is not on the woman's side in Ukraine, but if you're going to move them all the way to the US, where family law is probably, as the socioeconomic inferior partner, going to be in their favor, and you think that that the stats in your favor, I think you're being a bit delusional about that. So that's another big problem. And then the whole traditional values thing is a bit of it doesn't really make sense. Of course, radical feminism, not a big thing in all this entire region for sure. That's less likely in the US, but I don't think many of the guys who are interested in matchmaking really hang out with too many radical feminists. What else can we say? I've already done the kind of green card girl effect. A lot of guys going to the matchmakers also, and I think this is maybe guys attracted to this region, this broader region. They tend to read a lot of content that is pro-Russian, it seems, or definitely more leaning pro-Russian. That's just something that I noticed on the Match Guarantee live streams when he has his clients and they start talking about politics. They tend to repeat a lot of Kremlin talking points. And the issue about that, with respect to dating Ukrainians, is how's that going to work out in the long term? If you have someone, obviously, with this war, it's the biggest war in Europe since World War II. There's probably 1 million casualties on both sides. That means wounded, killed, and missing in action, plus killed civilians. Obviously, Russia invaded in 2014 and now in 2022 to end Ukrainian independence. I don't know how many Ukrainian women are going to, over the long term, be fine with that. If you are the kind of guy who's just reading Kremlin talking points all the time, I can see a lot of conflict, and it's just a little bit odd in general that I noticed that. And I've noticed that outside of the matchmaking with guys that I've met in Poland who are American, they usually start off the conversation, because obviously I have this channel, they recognize me, to a certain extent consume my content. They usually say something like, Connor, I know that, you're pro-Ukrainian. And then they start talking about something sympathetic to Putin or something. And I'm like, how is your dating life going in Poland? And they, inevitably, it's not going very well. And in terms of, long-term relations. And I'm like, I'm not so surprised, because Poland is not the place probably where, if you like Vladimir Putin, a long-term relationship is likely to work out. It's not impossible, obviously, but it's probably going to be a big negative with the Poles and her Polish family, for sure. So I think it's a little bit like that as well. It's probably something that I've noticed that I didn't hear anyone else talk about, but I saw that in these live streams. The other, I think I'll just move on to describing the best way, what I recommend. I already went on for 50 minutes with this, and then I'll get to your questions. So I expected to completely, my prediction, I still hold to it. They've already started to pitch, it seems, women from other nationalities, both of these matchmakers, the whole industry in general. Speaking with Antoine in that interview from CQME, he had an interesting take that he thinks that actually the future will be a lot about pitching Russian women, especially when the economy starts to collapse, but not to men in the West so much, because it'll be very hard to get visas for them being Russian. That actually will be pitching them to countries like China, where obviously they have a gender imbalance. There's I think you call it femicide, where a lot of female babies are aborted. Because they had the one-child policy and they wanted to have boys, so there's a lot of men that are looking for women. Obviously, China's rising economically overall, it's becoming more attractive socioeconomically. Russia's about ahead off a precipice economically, and there's a lot of pro-Chinese media in Russia. They're obviously, to a certain extent, allied in this war against Ukraine. You have the North Korean troops showing up to also fight against the Ukrainians. So he kind of sees it as going in that direction. I find interesting that also, how Rocket mentioned they were recently in China, kind of maybe a sign of things to come. Also find it amusing that they always use that they don't have any real transparency about the women who are in their dating site, their male clients is all a bit of a mystery, their real names, everything. They also use these thumbnails with huge, very revealing décolleté with a blonde woman who, I don't know if it's a stock photo or AI generated, but yeah, their clients have showed me what's kind of behind the scenes there, but I just find it kind of amusing that it, of course, traditional values, but anyways, large décolleté on their photos. Just find that kind of funny. But yeah, they were in China, and that's probably a sign of where this whole industry might go. It might even be at some point in the future other nationalities and trying to match them with other markets. Kind of interesting development. It will be hard to get visas probably for immigration for Russians going forward, especially if we are in a longer term, like new Cold War, then you could see things having a new Iron Curtain up and difficult. So let me get on to the real meat of what I wanted to talk about. Having gone through all this, described as an update what is going on with the matchmaking business and the Ukrainian buy business, what works best? What works best is exactly what the two guys who have these agencies actually did themselves. It's moving to the region, whether it is Ukraine, and obviously we have an active war, biggest war in Europe since World War II. I'm not recommending that you move to Ukraine in the current circumstances. I do have clients who, they nearly always have Ukrainian girlfriends, wives, or fiancés, and they have different incentive to move there. They really want to be there. They're fine with the risk level. But prior to 2022, both of these guys, they moved to Ukraine. They failed with matchmakers, which is what I always found curious about the fact that they set up matchmaking businesses afterwards. But they were effectively locally based businessmen, and they met their partners. I'm not sure if the guy uses the name Stryker. Whether he's actually married or what the current relationship status is with Luba, but I guess they can reveal that at a certain stage. They seem to keep it a little bit mysterious there, what's going on, but I'm going to work on that assumption. And obviously Joe is married to Anna. And that's basically, they moved and they were locally based businessmen, and they met through real life. And that's actually what worked for them. And that's really what I recommend doing. Doesn't mean you have to move 100%. And it doesn't mean, obviously, with the current war that you should move to Ukraine necessarily. But there are lots of other amazing options in this region. I've been quite a bit here in the Baltics. So in Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. I was talking to one of my clients, consulting client, the guy is who wrote me earlier, is the Ukrainian fiancé. I said, guys don't seem so interested in the Baltics, even though if you look at the top 5 countries for models per capita in the world, number 1 is Estonia, number 3 is Lithuania, and number 5 is Latvia. It's basically like, you want to find a place the most concentrated level of female beauty in the world. It is here, in this region, more than in Ukraine. I think the difference in, say, Ukraine or Russia, there are a couple of big cities, and then a lot of women tend to go there, so you have a kind of concentrated stim. Same with Warsaw in Poland. But actually, per capita, and I can verify this, having spent some time in the region in the last 18 months, it's more concentrated here. Values, I think women are somewhere in between what you'd see in the US in terms of female emancipation or radical feminism. There isn't much radical feminism here. I think women are more financially emancipated than, say, in Ukraine or further east. So you'll have to choose which is for you, but radical feminism is not a big thing. So at the end of the day, I actually almost think it's a better choice to be here. I think the big difference, maybe what puts guys off, is cost of living is not going to be as cheap as in Ukraine. It's cheaper than living in Western Europe or North America in general, but not dramatically. Here in Estonia, it's maybe 20-25% more cheaper, maybe 30 or 35% if you go to Latvia or to Poland. But it's not massive. Like Ukraine was really like, a third of the price, maybe, depending what you're doing. So it doesn't have the huge cost of living differential, but it has still better value for money. And man, it's you've almost no scamming here. Like, it's very rare it's almost unheard of. So you don't have the whole issues with scamming. You have maybe the level of English is way higher as well than you're going to find in Ukraine or further east. There's no real problem to actually just do everything in English here, even relationships. It doesn't seem to be a massive disadvantage, which was an issue in Ukraine. It's also an issue in Poland, I think, because those languages are bigger and people are, even the Poles who speak very good English, they seem to socialize all the time in Polish, most of them, and they have a preference for a Polish guy or a guy who can at least speak Polish. Yeah, you don't really face that here. So both of those guys who run these agencies, they did what I advocate for. So maybe they have what you want. Joe is married. Striker seems to be in a relationship from what I can tell. Maybe that's what you're looking for. But the options that you're going to get to a matchmaker didn't work for them. And actually coming to the region, spending a few months, building up a social circle, and socializing in real life as opposed to relying on dating apps. Amazing. I have to say amazing. I'm actually even reconsidering, even if we didn't have the war in Ukraine, and I actually do want to be in DESA for other reasons. But if I was just a guy who was only interested in the dating, and I'm not so sensitive on the cost of living, right? It is going to be cheaper, as I said, than being in North America here, but not dramatically. I think I'd come here over being in Ukraine. If that were my only reason. Obviously, I had other reasons to go to Ukraine. I was interested in the place. I love the food there, for example. And I generally like the culture, the local culture, because especially with some people in the Baltic, they're a little bit more standoffish, I think, a little bit more reserved. So it can take a bit more work to get to know them than Ukrainians. In spite of the reputation, Ukrainians, I actually don't think Ukrainians are that cold at all. I think it's actually here in the Baltics, they're a little bit more reserved. So yeah, I just think it's an amazing option, especially compared to Western Europe, 100% compared to the US and the dating dystopia that is over there. And this is not Eastern Europe, this is the Nordics, right? So any of those stereotypes that here, it's like some concrete Soviet jungle with desperate poverty, that's not the case here. Infrastructure is really good. It's clean, extremely safe. As said, even on the scamming level, just basically unheard of. The level of people are generally friendly. It's not actually that touristic here on top of it. So people are actually probably more open to you as a foreigner. Level English is way higher. Nightlife pretty good. And level of beauty is even probably slightly higher. As amazing that seems. But you got to find the right fit, obviously, in terms of values that you're looking for. I've had clients that used, as I said, the two matchmakers in question for tonight's live stream. And one of them even commented there. I mean, he met his current girlfriend, assuming, I haven't talked to him for a while, assuming he's with the same girl, but he moved to the region. That was what we discussed in our consulting. And he set that up. And yeah, I mean, compared to what he saw, not just with the matchmakers I mentioned this evening, but just in general, it's a different world. Once you can spend time in the region, get to know the people, build relationships, just in general, meet lots of cool guys as well to hang out with. It's next level. And your options will be not just a little bit better, they'll be like exponentially better in terms of just the beauty of the women you'll have access to. And you know, that gives you way more options to choose the best fit over a longer period of time. You're not under time pressure. That's one of the big things, right? If you have to make a quick decision, the chances of making an erroneous decision that's going to cost you a lot, potentially in a future divorce, huge. It's a lot of pressure. So having the time to get to know someone properly, it's kind of invaluable. So that's what I'll say. I will be probably focusing more on the Baltics. I may actually reconsider Poland. Dan asked me there. I think I will maybe look at Gdansk because it's also on the Baltic coast rather than Warsaw as much in the future. I haven't been bringing clients to Warsaw recently. I've been bringing most of them here. I think it's absolutely fantastic in spite of the weather. The weather is pretty terrible in the winter, by the way. Yes, today is the winter solstice, or it was last night. So we had it was like 9:30 sunrise, and it was already, the sun was already gone by officially 3:30, but I think it's gone by 2:30 almost, because it's so dark with the clouds here. There's no sunlight for months. So this is a big negative. But if you come in the summer, it's like the opposite, because then it's like sunny all the time. So I'm pretty enthusiastic about what it's going to be like in 2025 with respect to this region. I think it's overall for my clients, I think it's a better fit. I mean, most of my clients, they have the ones that live the in-person experience. There's links down below, obviously, in the description to that. They normally have good options anyways. They're not desperate and they have the resources. A lot of them are millionaires, decamillionaires, and even centimillionaires. Well, at least one. So they have the resources. They're not really so price sensitive. But here, it's definitely one of the best places, I think, in the world if you're a single guy to come to. And every night I've gone out with my Estonian buddy here, and we would just meet so many interesting, elegant, beautiful women with good, well, we can't tell off the bat the morals. You got to get to know people a little bit more than that. Also, plenty of Ukrainians. We've actually met at least, I'd say 10 Ukrainians in the last month, just been out socializing, Ukrainian with girls. So they're also here. If you really want to meet Ukrainians, as I said, you don't need to risk being in a country at war. Also to meet Belarusians, you can meet them in Poland, or you can meet them in Vilnius, Lithuania has a lot of Belarusians as well. So there are two good options to go to if you really want to meet Ukrainians and Belarusians. That's one of my clients who's coming for New Year's in Riga. That was his preference, but I convinced him we're going to spend New Year's in Riga. I think it's the better option than Warsaw. But you can, if that's particularly your preference, then you can meet them there as well. Anything else I want to say before we go to the questions? Yeah, one of the other clients who came to me, and they were a former client of Heart Rocket. Yeah, he described like the women that they were able to introduce him to, and it's like Champions League versus non-league. This is like the like a woman under 25, model looks, good morals. You think that the local hotshot guys aren't going to be trying to snap up those girls? Why would she ever be on a... she probably wouldn't even open a dating app. Never mind ever go to a marriage agency or matchmaker, unless she really wants to emigrate. That's the main thing. So you just have to put that into, take that into account and decide for yourself what, you want out of life and who you're aiming to meet. Anyways, I've talked enough, as I do. Probably too much already. And I'm really interested to see your comments, see how many of you even care about this. I mean, Dan was telling me, don't even talk about the matchmaking, don't talk about day gamers again. But then I get guys writing to me about it or coming to me for consulting calls. I'm like, well, apparently enough people still care. Again, if you come in late, there's a playlist I put together about all of my reaction videos, all my interviews with people from this industry. You can go and check it down below. The Ukrainian bride fetish industry, because I think it is a fetish, because I don't see the women really as traditional. Actually, I should have said that. Match Guaranty says in one of his videos that, Joe, he said that the number one thing that guys who become his clients write him, or potential clients, is they want traditional women. I don't know why you want to talk to Ukrainians if you want a traditional woman, because you're going to find way more traditional women in the Philippines and most of Latin America, in Africa. So I understand that a lot of those places, the women aren't as white. Let's be frank about it. That's also part of the fetish, I think, is like a traditional white, maybe even Christian girl. But again, most Ukrainians aren't that religious either, so I'm not really sure if that's what you're looking for. But maybe it's a combination. These guys have a fetish for. Yeah. Dan says all he wants for Christmas is a bride. Well, that's a pretty needy request. You'll probably end up with one-itis in that case, if you're that needy. Gary says, but I think he's talking about. Okay, Nicholas says, Heart Record, I can take a little info from that, but much seemed very shitty. Okay, well, I mean, Match Guarantee, oh yes, I just said, yeah. Another sign of desperation. A Match Guarantee recently offered $2,000 one-off payment plus recurring fees per month. That sounds marketing target, less knowledge, potential client primarily in YouTube. Yeah, I mean, they're not, maybe they can't sell the 10K anymore to that many guys. So they decided, because if it's a recurring fee, it could easily add up to more money. I mean, if the guy stays on for a year, that's another 6K plus the 2. So now you're almost up to the 10K. I don't know, how many people that had signed up for that 10. I think they added a 20 even for their package. So Gary asked me, do I know if Luba and Stryker? Yeah, interesting when you know the real name there. Are a couple for sure. Do you just suspect that out? They don't say anything, but the guy moved to Spain with her. It's a bit odd if they're not a couple, but what would you imply? He's always talking about her child. I mean, my understanding is is a son, and I know he talks about his pretty like they're. I don't know what the situation. I don't want to say more. They should probably clarify for their own sake on their channel what they're up to there. It just looks like to me that they're a couple. I mean, why would he go and live in Valencia with her, in the same city as her? Otherwise, it kind of looks odd if they're not a couple. And they interact as if they're a couple. I mean, they're always she's always touching him on the arm and stuff like this. So to me, they look like a couple. That's what I say. And yeah, if that's something, if that's what if you think what Stryker has and what Joe has is something that you want, then that's great. I mean, a relationship with a Ukrainian woman, I can obviously endorse that, being one for the last few years myself. But just think about how they achieved it. That's all I'm going to say. They didn't achieve it through matchmaking. And I think that's pretty ironic. Match Guaranty attract potential clients by giving negative impression by Western women, considering which is considered unethical marketing. Those passport bro men attracted to their service. Yeah, I mean, is that fair criticism or not? I mean, there's a lot of guys who are frustrated with their dating options in the West. Radical feminism is definitely a lot more prevalent in the US. So I think when people say Western women, I think it's really just American women. I think if you go to Spain or to Italy, are women as radical feminists as they are in the US? The other thing is, of course, is the obesity issue, which is just in general men and women. In the US, it's like super high overweightness and obesity relative to here, especially under the age of 40 or 35, especially amongst single women. Like there aren't so many single women, having been here in Tallinn, who are obese. And there are some that are overweight, maybe a little bit, but obese, very rare I see it. Even when I was back in Ireland, there's a lot of women under 35. I think statistically, is it 15% are obese even? Yeah. Or was that over? I can't remember. I think it was 15% obese and maybe 30% or even overweight. It's a fraction of that here. Same in Ukraine, same in Poland, same in Serbia, same in, I don't know, all these countries, North Macedonia, whichever country in the region you want to pick, Moldova. So they're definitely, I can see why guys, I mean, I think the dating options are better overall in terms of, overall attractiveness, aesthetically, for sure. Values, as long as you understand that they're not that traditional, they're a little bit more in that scale. If you Joe tries to put women, he tries to describe American women as 1 or 2s, and he says Ukrainian women are like a 7 or 8, if I remember where you put it. But you put it really high. And I'm like, it's a 3 or 4 at best, right? Women in Armenia are closer to 7 or 8, but they're traditional, real traditional. They're usually don't have sex before marriage. That's one thing. It's particularly frowned upon, for example. Divorce rate is low there relative to Ukraine. They still have some, but it's not as high. Last time I checked, at least. What else? But they're not looking for immigration as much. That's and all the guys who've gone, the passport bro or foreign vloggers who went to Armenia, they said the one big issue they had is the dating scene. They said is really conservative, so they weren't really able to meet local girls. So it's kind of a paradox. They want a lot of guys attracted to this. They want the traditional woman. The traditional woman isn't probably going to want to emigrate with a guy from another country. That's just from what I see. They're probably going to protect their modesty, should I put it like that, until they're in a long-term local relationship. And they don't have high divorce rates, so they're not going to be with a single mom in their 30s and maybe in a situation where it's more attractive to emigrate and have someone, move to a country where the economic opportunities are better and have a guy take care of their child, right? So doesn't make them bad people, just means they have different incentives. And one says heart record a bit better as they provide positive education but provide negative impression about them. Okay. I think, I won't say anything else about Hard Rocket. Let's just move on to the comments about their advice. I mean, I don't think it's particularly in-depth in terms of if you want to date women under 30, no kids, model looks, should you be listening to either of them? But maybe that's not what you want. Maybe you're fine with what they're advising on. But I'm just pointing out the difference. Champion League versus non-league. Yeah, it's a different world. I saw on YouTube a foreign affair, held social parties for single foreigners in Odessa, Ukraine, and Cebu, Philippines. It was funny seeing those men table hot thinking that they are the best, says Stephen. Stephen is the guy who actually told me about the Polish loophole for Americans. The Americans actually have visa free into Poland every 90 days. So it's more than the Schengen allowance of 90 every 180. If you're an American citizen, there is an agreement from the 90s, which is basically an agreement through correspondence from diplomats at the time. And Stephen told me about this 5 years ago. So thanks, Stephen. It wasn't useful to me back prior to 2022 at all. But with this invasion, I have clients who moved to Poland, and I was able to advise them, that they getting a visa in Poland. It's a little bit more complicated than say for Latvia, where you can just invest in the real estate. So it's actually a pretty good tip. Held search. I think they held it in Kyiv actually, because I saw the video during the war, what the active war will say, in hitting Kyiv. I don't see why guys would do that, but each their own. I think if you're, just go to the Philippines or go to Warsaw if you want to meet Ukrainian women. But they're going to be way more traditional, inverted commas, if you go to the Philippines. And the socioeconomic situation is lower, and they have less immigration, right? So it's going to work a lot better, in my opinion. And when accreditation level, both of the agencies not accredited by the Global Love Institute, the accredited global. Okay, I don't really know much about that. Anyone says he will not invest in them because they are not accredited. Okay, well, maybe not. I don't know much about that. Dan is here to troll us. What do you think about organized luxury gateway trips with hottie Slavic women? Saw some on social media. Well, we already discussed this off. You're basically getting a travel girl, probably. That's the way we used to describe them. I've dated girls like that back when I was single, back 2019 from Belarus, one in particular. I don't really go much into it. There was actually a lot of international scandal about some of them, what they were involved in, involving Russian oligarchs, all this stuff. Like, it's kind of crazy when I think about it. But she used to go on these trips. I mean, what are you expecting out of it? Maybe a hookup? And but she's going to fly back to Belarus afterwards. In this particular case, I met her in Belarus anyways, so I didn't need to drop. What are these trips? You think you told me $20,000-$30,000, and I can go to the cafe in Warsaw and meet the same girl? So I don't know. If you really want to do that and go to a luxury getaway trip where they're going to invite a bunch of hottie girls, but they may also be paid to be there in some capacity. Be aware of that. Not saying that's particularly the case with the one that you cited, but I have been told by guys who organized those things in the past, because they tried to pitch it to me, that some of the girls were paid to be there, not just for showing up, shall we say. So, I guess it could work, but it's a big investment. I mean, if you really want to go and take that trip, I guess, and you don't want to really hang out in the region and just meet the girls socially, because it's not hard. I mean, I'm just thinking with my Estonian buddy, like, you showed me the clips and the level, and a lot of the women were beautiful, 100%. Some of them really looked like they were real models. But every night we go out on a Friday, Saturday in Tallinn, we meet the same level of beauty. So, and we didn't have to drop 20K. And yeah, it might be nice to go to Tulum. I think you said one of them is in. I'm not so interested personally, and if it's just about meeting the beautiful women, again, I think my cocktails are 11 euros here. It's not, I don't have to drop 20K and go to all this hassle, but I guess I can just meet the girls here and then say, hey, let's go on a trip to Tulum if I start a relationship with them, if I was single. But that would seem a lot more sensible to me. But you do you, Dan. Benaki says, yes, he got Nima from Joe for the Black Friday deal. Yeah, I doubt you took him up on it because you already told me, but you're in a committed relationship last time. Dan says he has czaritis. Love that. I'm going to use that, Dan. Every guy who watches this content should have czaritis. Match Guaranty is good, says Ernest. Yeah, Ernest, we already talked. He says that he has a beautiful Ukrainian wife now, so there you have a counter argument. But I did say that for some guys it works, for some guys it doesn't. But we should also point out that your wife is not under 30, should we say. Just leave it at that. So it also depends, because that's the thing. It depends on who you're trying to meet. So yeah, if you want to meet a woman under 30 who's model looks and doesn't have kids, ain't gonna be. It's not gonna be a likelihood. Even on any online dating, to be frank, even if you go on Tinder or Bumble, they're not gonna spend that much time there. There is another more upmarket, exclusive dating app. Raya is the name. And some of my clients have used that. You have to be invited into it if you're a guy at least, and a girl as well. I think they just basically judge the girls on their looks more or less, and the guys on how much money they have or social status, if I understood. And yeah, my client who's on it, like he was disappointed then with the women he met, and he said, "Yeah, but then because it always comes down to this. Then we just go to the cocktail bar, we hang out at the nice part of the city in a nice restaurant, and there are better looking women around us anyways than even on those more exclusive apps." So yeah, it depends what you're looking for. I understand that if you're looking for a woman in her 40s, that probably people aren't as social. Maybe in general, they have kids probably already, so it's a little bit more constraining. Whether they're just to go to events in general, you don't have to go to a restaurant, a bar, or a club. You could also be going to the opera. It could be socializing at, I know, the Ukrainian community event. I mean, there's lots of different things you can do to socialize. In Warsaw, I mean, you can meet women in their 30s or 40s who are very attractive, and you meet them out socially at the restaurants we go to. There's one or two, also some bars. So it's not a problem to meet them socially. You just have so many more options. Antoine, actually, to his credit, in his videos, he says that when he used to do his trips, like I guess they call them a romance tour of some sort or a matchmaking tour, that the clients would say to him, "But why are you introducing to these women at the agency when there's so many more beautiful women I see everywhere around?" But those women that are more beautiful around don't go to they hardly go on a dating app. They have options, so many options. So yeah, just depends what you're looking for. That's what I'll say about it. But there you have a counter argument to obviously what I'm saying. And one says he disagrees that they use sex tourists. He agreed that for men should focus on. He says he agrees that men should focus on one lady at a time and move to a different lady if the first one does not work out. But okay, meet. I disagree entirely. You're going to end up with one-itis, most likely. You're going to invest all your time. So you're probably very hard to avoid being needy if you basically limit yourself to one option. It's just implicit. It's evolution biology. It's going to put you at you're going to lose value. That's in the woman's eye, almost certainly. And yeah, I'm not saying that you have to sleep with many women at the same time. That's personal. I'm not saying you shouldn't either. And but talking to many women, figuring out it seems completely sensible to me. Unless you're in a committed, monogamous sexual relationship, or maybe you don't want to have sex before marriage, fine. But then I would say wait until you're actually married and then stop talking to other women. At that point, it's gonna. Anyways, that's my opinion about it. But you're free to disagree. Ernest says she is beautiful, educated, high quality. Match guarantee, one woman at a time. But you don't know because you didn't do anything another way. I don't agree, but free to disagree on that. Steve says, in his opinion, he's been to Ukraine many times. It's not about being a loser in his own country. It's about the excitement of having romance with a beautiful foreign woman. Yeah, maybe the novelty of someone from another country also adds a little bit of flavor to the whole experience. I agree with that. And definitely for what I'm looking for, I mean, I didn't have a problem. I should also clarify that if you're new to the content. I didn't have a problem dating attractive women in Western Europe. It's a long time since I spent a lot of time in the US, so it's been hard for me to speak to that. But on the last trip, I think it was 2016, maybe it's 2017. I'm pretty sure 2016 that I was in the US. And I met lots of pretty girls. I went to West Hollywood. Yeah, I didn't think it was that bad. But so I didn't really start. I didn't, first of all, I didn't hang out in Ukraine or choose to spend a lot of time in Ukraine because I didn't have good options in Western Europe. And I can't really say about the US because it's just that one trip in the last decade. And so maybe wouldn't be representative of my experience if I lived there. And even in places like London, always met very interesting, beautiful women. And but I just thought, for sure, it's clearly better for me in a place like Ukraine, also Moldova. Now I'm in the Baltics. It's the same thing. I mean, it may even be better for me here, even though I use English all the time. I speak Russian and Ukrainian, and Romanian as well. So I can speak the local languages in Romania, Moldova, Ukraine. Obviously, back in the day, I went to Russia a couple of times and Belarus quite a bit. I also speak Belarusian. which doesn't help me at all, really. But because every single Belarusian can basically speak Russian as well. Most of them speak it as their first language nowadays. But yeah, I just thought the options were even better. I didn't come because I also had other reasons. I studied, in addition to being a lawyer, I had worked at the European Commission. I dealt with some things to do with Ukraine, especially with the gas industry on a legal level. And yeah, with international relations, that was my master's. So I actually had a specialization in Ukraine, Russia, Central Asia, this region, Belarus. And I started learning Russian then. So for me, I was just really interested in the country and the culture as well. Ernest says, my goal is to marry one. Yeah, I saw you gave him a testimonial. That's all fair. Ernest was my consultant client, so I actually advised him about what to do. So I don't know, is that down to Joe or is it down to me? That's a good plug for my consulting down below. So if you are going to use a matchmaker, maybe you want to have a call with me first because I work for Ernest. Father give that to me. Yeah, that's his real name. At least that's the name that I see. So I know it looks unusual, but that is actually his name. Yeah. He's just pointing out that he knows me and he invested in consulting with me. So I can vouch that it is him. It is not Joe speaking under a pseudonym. I know he is. Dan says, if I'm a 10, then a girl 2 points lower is an 8. Not a bad deal at all. But why would you, if you were really a 10, Dan, why would you be happy with an 8? You're 2 points lower. But we both know you're not a 10. So 2 points lower isn't anything close to that. Caucasian Fritz is the handle here. Connor is the Special Forces. Always pertinent advice. Yes. I don't know who's using that username, but one of my former clients, I don't think it's the former client from back in 2019 who called me the Special Force. Actually, no, I know the Special Force, he called me the Insider. That's when we started using that in my marketing. The Special Forces is my other client who's actually coming to Tallinn in a few days. So I don't know if it is you. Billy Nomads is better off in Manila. Yeah, that's the thing. There's I see guys who really are overweight, unattractive, don't look like they have high socioeconomic status back home, and they go to Philippines and they're in a long-term relationship. So it's definitely a better place for the typical guys who are tempted by the Ukrainian bride business to go, in my opinion. But then again, women are Asian. If you don't like Asian women, I guess it's not for you. Dan asked me, did I give up in Poland? No, as I clarified. I'm actually thinking of Gdansk in the summer. It could be pretty interesting. But here, compared to Warsaw, it's a bit better because of the level of beauty is higher. There aren't as many day gamers. There just aren't as many foreign guys chasing girls here, so they're not jaded. Like, I think a lot of Polish girls are jaded. Like, most pretty Polish girls are not interested in foreigners that don't speak Polish. That was my experience. It was your experience. So I think it's just easier in the dating scene. There is no big city, though. So, Riga is the biggest city. You could say the metropolitan area apparently is 1 million, but it's more like a city of 750,000. Warsaw City is between 2 and 3 million. And there's just a lot more going on there. So you got to balance that. And obviously, if you're a guy at the top end in Warsaw, then you probably are already happy enough. You're already meeting models and whatnot. And you have a lot more Ukrainians and Belarusians in Warsaw than you do here. So again, it's kind of different cities for different guys. But all of them are amazing. And yeah, when I think about it, if I were a single guy looking at it compared to pre-2022 Ukraine, in spite of obviously loving Ukraine as a place, if I'm willing to go there during this hot phase of the war, I think just on the dating side, it's probably better here. That's it, because you can use English easier, and the women on average are probably a little bit better looking. But it depends, obviously, what you're looking for. And there isn't that. It's not like the US where there's crazy feminism, radical feminism and stuff. That isn't really what you see here. They're a little bit more financially emancipated than in Ukraine. Somewhere in between, I would say. Stephen says, what works for him being in Ukraine, Moldova, and Poland? I know you've been going to all three, Stephen. and meeting girls who are working in malls, shops, and meeting girls who are in international church, which is in every European city. Yeah, if you're part of a religious denomination, then it's always been logical for me, just go to that church. The feedback I get from my clients who are religious, are practicing, you're normally the Christian from some smaller denomination, they see the issues when they go to the churches. There are very few single women. And yeah, that's an issue. So yeah, that's another challenge. But obviously they would have similar values, presumably, if you go to the same religious denomination. Rather than Joe talks about this, that it was an issue for him, that he was very enthusiastic about his religious denomination, and it scared a lot of girls off in Ukraine in the beginning. But obviously, if you meet them at the church, then it's not going to be an issue. Meeting girls, yeah, in everyday life, lots of opportunities. Meet women. I just think that if you go to a bar, you don't need to drink alcohol at the bar. Actually, my studying buddy doesn't drink alcohol even, so it doesn't mean you have to be blind drunk or something in some, unsavory place, some dive bar or something. But it just tends to corral single, more attractive women into smaller places where it's more socially acceptable to talk to strangers. It's definitely here in the Baltics. In the Balkans, it's actually a little bit different. That's one thing in Romania. They tend to go out as groups and stick in groups. So that's actually a little bit harder, I found, in Romania. The Baltics is not a problem at all. Poland, not a problem at all. Ukraine, not a problem at all. Moldova, not a problem at all. Romania was a bit of a problem. Albania, because I've been to Albania and to Kosovo. Yeah, it was more of an issue. Serbia, I mean, I know that there's obviously a dispute between whether Kosovo is independent of Serbia or not. But in the Kosovo part, yeah, it was very much like Albania in that sense, while Serbia was a lot more easier to socialize in. But my feedback and what I observed in Belgrade is a very hard city if you're a foreign guy. Meeting beautiful Serbian girls, very tricky, surprisingly hard. Almost no one who spent time there seems to think it's good for that, but cost of living is low though, for sure. Tony Man says, can't you meet beautiful under 30 women in your home country like the US, for example? As I outlined, my experience in the US in the last 10 years, I lived in the US like 20 years ago, basically, for a couple of years. But where I worked, and I was in university and grad school. It's where I studied international relations and first started to get interested in this region where I end up now. And yeah, I never really had a problem personally. And beautiful women under 30. Yeah, even if I go to London, I think London is a great city for that. But obviously it's more expensive, and the weather. Well, the weather isn't any worse than Tallinn. It's probably actually got better weather. Yeah, because it's an international city. A lot of attractive women come from all over the world and they hang out in London. It's not so hard. So I would say for me, yeah, that's not really an issue. If I were in, like one of my clients who wrote to me there, would have been on this privately. Like he lives in a small town in Canada. I don't know what his chances are with beautiful women under 30 in a place like that. And even if I were there, I don't know what I've never been to a small town. I've been to a small town in Canada because my uncle lives in one, my uncle now. But that's a really small town. It's actually in British Columbia. Very beautiful and idyllic spot. And the fishing is amazing. But yeah, I think if I were a single guy, I wouldn't be hanging out there hoping to meet the love of my life. I think maybe I could bring her there, but yeah, very rural. So yeah, it depends where you are. I think there's also kind of a trend, I should have said, maybe with the guys who are attracted by this. So Antoine talks about a lot that they tend to live somewhere rural. So then it's harder to meet women because, it's a rural area. And also, I think my client also told me, the guy wrote to me that because he went on this romance tour, there was like over 25 guys, they all stayed in contact. He told me, there's also interesting kind of feedback on this stuff. It's not one of the two that are mentioned in the title in this video. It's a different one. That doesn't exist anymore. It was closed down voluntarily by the guy who ran it. But he said that in general, the guys were on the shorter side. Again, guys who are going to have on average a bit tougher dating. If you're like, I'm 178, which is 5'10". Here, by the way, the average height of women is 169, almost 170, and younger girls is even taller. I meet so many girls who are like model looks here. They're like at least 174, 175. But if you're on the shorter side, yeah, more likely to be interested in the matchmaking. That's what he said. He said there were a couple of guys who were tall, and I met really tall guys also went to matchmakers, but in general tend to be shorter because those are the guys who, women are, in general, check the guys who are taller rather than shorter on average, and definitely guys who are at least their height and taller. So they have more of an incentive to look for help. Yeah. He also told me that out of the guys who went on his romance tour, I mean, I guess we can now call him a success story many years later, and nothing to do with the city he was brought to, the women he met, or even the matchmaking service he used, because he's marrying a Ukrainian and going to live in Kyiv even with the war. But he said of the other guys, only one ever married a woman from the region. And no, I think he told me two ended up in relationships with women from the region, but one he went to Russia afterwards. And this is like many years ago. And then one stayed on in the city and met his girlfriend that way, but he didn't actually meet her on the tour. None, like from what I understood, no one met anyone on the tour that turned into a long-term relationship at all. And again, it's not the two companies in the title of this video. And yeah, they now. I asked them where do they focus on now if they're still mainly single. He said they nearly all go to Asia, and actually I'm going to East Asia, so to Japan. He said, it surprised me. Yeah, but Southeast Asia not really a surprise to go to the Philippines if you're looking with those criteria. So can't you meet? I don't know if the question was directed to me or the guys in the chat. But a lot of guys, they don't have those options, and that's because beautiful women under 30, no kids, in shape, good set of moral values. Where are you more likely to meet them? In Tallinn, Kyiv, Chisinau, Almaty, Astana, Warsaw, or Charlotte, because I have a client who's coming, he's flying from Charlotte in a few days. And one of the other clients is from Ohio, Southern Ohio, very rural. Yeah, where are you more likely to meet those? It's just the way it is. They're just several times. It's exponentially easier here. But yeah, I wasn't, short of options where I was living before. But I was living in Munich before I started hanging out a lot in this region. And yeah, I already described my issue in Munich was more that I had a good social circle there, and I would meet beautiful women under 25. This is over 10 years ago when I lived there, but didn't end up in a long-term relationship with any of them. I would hook up with them occasionally, make out, maybe occasionally more than that in terms of intimacy. But I wasn't high enough value. That's the thing. These girls were also had options of dating the players in the Bayern Munich football team. They were literally my competition a lot of the time. Those guys are millionaires. They're way more sporty. They have way higher social status. They also, well, some of them are foreigners, but many of the guys who were German even on the German national team. So yeah, it's just I had more competition. I was relatively lower value. So that's one of the differences. Whilst in Odessa, there's way more women who fit that criteria. And I guess, yeah, actually one of the girls I was seeing, she was just broken up with a guy who was a underage national team footballer. So I guess I was kind of competing with similar enough guys. He was playing for Dynamo Kyiv back in the day. Dynamo, how do you say it in Ukraine? Dynamo, Kyiv. Dan says, my friend said the Ukrainian opportunist girls all left since the invasion, so the better quality ones who care about their families and countries stay in Ukraine. It's better for guys to go now. Hard for me to say, because you have to also remember the girls that are single, they have less of an incentive, ceteris paribus, to return or stay in Ukraine than the girls who are in a relationship because their husband or boyfriend, fiance is actually there in Ukraine. So mainly the single girls are more likely to have left. We also see that in the stats for Ireland. Ireland has really good stats on the Ukrainians who have come since 2022. Unmarried, they didn't ask them if they were single, if they had a boyfriend, but unmarried, there's 3 times as many unmarried Ukrainian women as unmarried Ukrainian men who've come, and overall it's twice as many women over 20 than men over 20. So that indicates that the men who came were way more likely, sorry, the women who came were way more likely to be single than the men who came. So maybe that means you should be hanging out in Dublin if you want to meet Ukrainian girls, because a lot of single ones there apparently. Although we kind of dispersed them throughout the country, but I haven't been back in Ireland for over 2 years, so it's hard for me to say what it's like now. Most of the Ukrainian, because Angela went to some English classes with Ukrainians in my hometown of Galway. We were back there summer 2022. And all of the women that she met there, whether they were in relationships or single, I think all of them went back to Ukraine. I have to double check. I think there was one who was really, her son was 17 at the time, and she was worried that he could be conscripted. Obviously, that's not the case. Ukraine doesn't conscript even now men under 25. They're not mobilized. At the time, it was men under 27 only. So yeah, but if he goes back, then he wouldn't be able to leave the country without permission. So it's a little bit obviously restrictive. Yeah, any further questions? I spoke longer than I intended to, and I need to hit the gym because my gym closes at 9 and it's already 20 to 7. So by the time I get there, I'll have less than 2 hours. I want to do a good workout today. Lots of beautiful women at my gym, by the way, as well. Another place where you can meet women. It's not going to cost me any extra. Just need to talk to them. And that saying is not a particularly athletic guy. Let's be frank about it. But I have met women in the gym as well. But it's definitely a tougher environment for me. It's not going to be my optimal place, probably. Dan says, Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas to you. Many happy returns. Happy holidays, whatever you're celebrating, whether it's Christmas, whether it's another holiday at the moment. And yeah, as I said, I'm going to be here in Tallinn. Going to have an impromptu Irish-Estonian Christmas with some Ukrainian girlfriends that my Estonian friend invited over. And I've got to also prepare something for. Yeah, something traditionally Irish. But again, women who are super attractive. Ukrainian, you can even meet them here. There aren't as many here as you're going to meet in other parts of Europe, like if you go to Germany, if you go to Poland, for example, or Ireland. But still, I've met around 10 since I've been here. All attractive. So all of them under, I mean, they're nearly all under 25 as well. They're definitely under 30. All of them. So yeah, all these opportunities here. Dan, tell us what you're doing. You sent me a lot of messages in the last few days. You're going to pay for some Ukrainian dating event in Bucharest, you said. Since you're using a pseudonym, we won't reveal who you are, obviously. Thanks, N1. I'm not sure. I always forget, except for Dan. I always remember his pseudonym here. Merry Christmas. Many happy returns. And yeah, hope that you're all celebrating with some family, some loved ones, some friends at this time of festive joy in general. Maybe with a Ukrainian woman. Of course, that would be the best situation for the guys who are interested in this live stream, I guess. Anything else I want to say? I was going to say something. What else should I talk about? Yeah, I have clients coming for New Year's and just before New Year's. So Tallinn, my research, I will have the video. Yeah, I will have the video. I have to look at the latest draft. I need to just publish these and stop taking 3 weeks because we changed two scenes in the video with some B-roll. But anyways, yeah, it will be out soon about Estonia. I'm very impressed. If you're here as a single guy, I think it's pretty phenomenal. Just the only thing is the cities are not so big. And that's the Baltics in general. Just cities aren't big. I'd say that's probably the biggest negative. The weather in the winter, but that's kind of everywhere in the region. But it's particularly dark and wet here. It's wetter than Warsaw and Minsk. Because I spent time in the winter in both of those. And they didn't have sunlight, but it wasn't as rainy. Here it's so bloody rainy. But yeah, level infrastructure really good for a small city. It's basically the Nordics here. Calling it Eastern Europe is ridiculous these days from my point of view, geopolitically and the level of development. Yeah, again, because the language is so small that it's not so necessary to learn Estonian or Latvian or Lithuanian to be maybe even better. I can't vouch for it because I don't speak it. If you did learn it, and I do use Russian sometimes because there are minorities here that speak Russian. Not so much in Tallinn, more in Riga. Yeah, I spoke in Russian. But level of beauty is higher on average. As much as I like, at the end of the day, we're talking very narrow margins at the very top, right? So, but they have more models here because girls are taller, with longer legs in general, I would say. More blonde here than in Ukraine or the other countries in the region, for sure. Only Finland and Sweden, I think, have higher percentages of blondes than Estonia, for example. But it's also super high in Latvia and less in Lithuania, the more brunette there. Dan says maybe lots of single moms. Yeah, I don't know what you're going to meet there, but it would be interesting for me to hear. Another client of mine told me about these kind of, I guess you could call them speed dating events in Bucharest, where it's Ukrainian women, but normally not Romanian men, but just foreign men who live there want to meet Ukrainians. I don't think too many of the beautiful Ukrainian girls stay in Romania unless they are from the Romanian-speaking minority. Because my other client, who's actually coming to Riga for New Year's, he was dating one of them. So, yeah, so he told me about, and he lives in Bucharest. Tony Man says it was a general question, not just for you specifically. Okay. Well, I give you but no one else wrote. Also, right, if you're watching this on the replay as well, like how interested are you in the matchmaking scene? Is anyone interested, or it's just like more entertainment? Because it will give Match Guarantee and Joe some kudos on his on entertainment factor. I find it cringy personally, a lot of his stuff back in the day, but yeah, there is a bit of charisma there and funny to watch. But yeah, the content these days, I mean, it was really difficult for me to plow through listening to both of them, both Match Guarantee and Heart Rocket. There's just nothing really that relevant or that interesting. And again, I'm not the target demographic, obviously. But there's nothing new there or interesting for me to listen to. On the other hand, CQME and Antoine, I watch his live streams quite often because I find it interesting, his perspective. He often veers into geopolitics. He said his audience doesn't like that. And I suspect because a lot of them read a certain amount of Russian media without realizing it. I mean, it's just relayed through, there's this media scandal with Tenet Media in the US, and apparently I don't know which department is, I guess the FBI have a list of like 2,300 influencers or some huge number that they suspect of being part of a Russian information operation. So that's probably why they don't want to listen to him talk from a more informed position about the geopolitics. They don't agree. They're attracted to all this Russia, big, strong, going to win kind of message, which with respect to matchmaking, they shouldn't be hoping for, because they need the women to be desperate economically, to be interested in them and want to emigrate to America. And if Russia were to win, they wouldn't be leaving or be open. And that's their future if they want the kind of, I was going to say white, I guess, traditional valued women. I mean, where else are they going to try and picture from? Because if they're really traditional, they wouldn't be interested in the matchmaking in general, in my opinion. Like Armenia, still no matchmaking agency there. Why? Because they are actually more traditional, so they're not going to be interested. They're not single moms in their 30s looking for an immigration program. And I understand why those women want to immigrate. They don't have good options. They're not with the father of the child. They're over 30. And child needs to be fed and clothed. So for a lot of them, that's a trade-off. But beware, once they have the green card, opportunity, time to monkey branch. And they'll have figured out American family law, British family law, Canadian family law. They'll have figured out their rights well in advance. They'll be down cackling at the beauty salon with other women from the same region. And you don't think any of them figured out family law? You are So naive, and you will be, well, I guess you need to have proper asset protection in that case. But don't, I actually met a guy who came up to me in Odessa, was like, thinking yeah, it was before I left, so it would have been early autumn. And he told me that he met his ex-wife through a matchmaker. And she was Moldovan though, but the matchmaker was in Ukraine. And it's, again, not one of the two that I referenced in the title. It's a different one. He told me which one it was. And yeah, he said it was all fine until, and I said, did she have the green card? He says, yeah, it was after the green. I said, man, it's so predictable. And he said, I think he said 2 million he lost, 2 to 3 million. This guy was obviously super wealthy. I guess she took half his wealth, maybe more. I don't know. But yeah, crazy. I had no asset protection. The guy was in his 50s, so I guess he was late 40s. He said there wasn't a big age gap even. There was only a couple of years. Matt says, sounds like you should have assets in a trust before marrying these girls. Yeah, but is that really going to work? This whole trust thing, you need proper legal advice on that. I would definitely be getting proper legal advice. And whether it's really going to hold up, because all of these things are great in theory, but precedent, when, if a lot of guys are putting everything in trusts, I guarantee you there will be precedent set that you can't do that very quickly. But at the moment, it might still work. Or there'll be a law passed. You can't keep hiding stuff in trust, ultimately. But, to get the proper legal advice on that for your jurisdiction. Because even a prenup, court can set them aside, even if in principle they're legal. Ukraine, by the way, doesn't have that issue. You can assign the assets in the case of splitting up by just contract. You can do it post-nup, prenup. No issue. There's marital assets are marital assets, so 50% divided each way unless there's an agreement to do something else. And there's no real alimony. Child support is ridiculously low. It's disgracefully low, in my opinion. And most guys, they can avoid paying it in Ukraine because it's just trying to get it enforced is so hard for women. Normally, the children are going to be with the mother or child because the fertility rate is so low. It's normally one child. It's rare I've ever met a Ukrainian family in a city with more than 2 kids. Really, really rare. Usyk, who won last night, I think he has 4 kids, actually. He's 3 or 4. So he's a big exception. Doing a lot for the reverse the trend on the Ukrainian population. He's originally from Simferopol in Crimea. But he won yesterday. He's now a generational great as a boxer. I don't follow boxing so much, but I watched it because obviously he was against Tyson Fury. He's British and he has some Irish heritage. He's a traveler. So that's why he calls himself the Gypsy King. And he was defeated for the 2nd time in a row by Alexander Usyk. So interesting to see Ukraine do well on the sporting front there. Pretty good. Guys, any more questions? Again, write to me whether you're on watching this replay or you're watching it now, whether you find the whole world of Ukrainian bride business remotely interesting. Is it completely passé? Does it sound ridiculous that people pay for this kind of service? I can see the value of matchmaking for certain guys. I just don't think it's anywhere near like moving to the place you don't even have to move full term, like come for a few months. Your options are going to be exponentially better. Like, as Antoine said, the other matchmaker, the beautiful women are not going to sign up to a matchmaking service. And in my experience, and it was different 5 or 6 years ago, I don't think they use dating apps that much, from what I can see. You got to really meet them in person, work on your social skills. There's other things you need to do. Instagram, that's a big one. It's so easy. It's such a great tool to demonstrate your value there with these candid clips and the way you do your profile. I help my Estonian buddy here with it, as well as my clients, obviously. But he's good. I learned a lot from advising, actually, because obviously I've been here for 2 months. So I see him improve. When he talks to women, he's smiling at the moment. We had a bit of work to do on the messaging. He was super needy. That's this thing about talking to one girl at a time. I basically have to take his phone, slap his wrist, stop writing. He's something bloody needy. but he's slowly improving on that front. So yeah, sounds like you have. What kind of law did you practice? I practice competition law, European competition law, international trade law. So competition law is called antitrust in U.S. parlance. Originally it comes from when robber barons used to hide their assets behind trusts, the control of the company, so that they could fix prices in cartels. It was like there's the Sherman Act from 1890, which was like antitrust. It was so that's also, maybe I hadn't thought about it until now, but that's also with hiding your marital assets or behind a trust as well. With doing that in order to fix prices, eventually the government stepped in and created antitrust. So, but in the European Union, it's called competition law. They just have a different name for it. So anti-monopoly law, if you're in Ukrainian, if you translate it across, and international trade law. So tariffs. Funny that Donald Trump wants to talk about them all the time now. And I have very intelligent guys write to me, some friends, some clients, and they're like, yeah, he's going to, like, China will pay for the tariff. I'm like, man, Google what a tariff is and how it works in practice. This is like first class of an economics program to understand that. That doesn't make much sense. But maybe, he also apparently said that he wants the new NATO target to be 5% of GDP. The US is only 3%, 3 point something percent. So I think it's just like he just says these big numbers and then he'll negotiate it down to something a lot more realistic. That would be my guess on what he's saying. But anyways, kind of went off topic there about tariffs. Yeah, maybe write me also in the comments if you spend time in this region, whether it's Ukraine, whether it's the Baltic states, whether it's Poland. I know Dan has been to Romania, Moldova, Poland. He's scared of the Baltics because he's 173 centimeters. And yeah, the average height here, probably of the girls under 30 is going to be more than 169. So probably they're almost Dan's height. So yeah, I mean, it is something to take into account that girls are taller here than they're going to be in Ukraine. So yeah, write all that good stuff in the comments down below, all those playlists, those links. If you are coming to Ukraine, got the guide, logistic information, my hospitality guide, same for Moldova. Dan invested in, you invested in the Moldova guide. And you were on my Ukrainian Move to Ukraine program from back in the day. But yeah, then we had this invasion, so you never moved. Some of the guys in the program had already moved. And one is even still there. One still has his property there as well. So yeah, that's the key. So what I would say in general, what I look at is, in terms of influencers, have they achieved something that I want to achieve? And are they teaching me the methods that actually help them to achieve it? So that's what I try to do in this channel. I show you what I did to date Ukrainian models, right? My current girlfriend included. And what I did, I mean, it wasn't just Ukrainian models, it was from lots of different countries in the region. And when I say dating, I mean having an actual relation, not sitting on Date Sim paying, which I'm not really sure what Match Guaranty means a lot of the time when he says dating, because he's only focusing on one girl. And is he just sitting in a restaurant, buying food for them, or what is he actually doing? But he can, no doubt he'll clarify that in some response video. But yeah, that's why I teach what worked for me, whilst they teach what didn't work for them. And yeah, interesting that they don't talk about relocation to the region and how your options would be exponentially better, like it was for them. They failed. I think Hard Rocket, did he go to 3 matchmakers, including Match Guaranty? So yeah, I remember when I met them. By the way, Striker, if Striker came to me as a client, world would have been his oyster, because he's probably my age, and yeah, he looks fine, and like aesthetically, nothing wrong. He looks in good shape as well. I'm sure he works out quite a lot, and yeah, I don't remember anything particularly that mean he couldn't have dated a woman, no kids, in her 20s, model level. But obviously, you need the mentality and the mindset and the knowledge in order to do that. And of course, it would have been better if he had learned Ukrainian and or Russian, depending, because he was living in Odessa. Whilst I think Joe said he was in Sumy. It's probably a bit more Ukrainian speaking, maybe. I've only been there once. And then Kyiv. Well, Kyiv, even before the invasion, Ukrainian was more useful than Russian. Yeah, so that's the key. You need to move, integrate, create a social circle. I meet lots of cool guys here, because I'm also looking at the real estate. I had that video from Riga. If you're €250,000 investment, and you can get Schengen residency. So go check out that video. It's a few videos back with my friend who's Ukrainian, who's a realtor there. And yeah, I'm probably going to make a video here in Tallinn about real estate. I met some guys and some girls who from the most reputable and biggest real estate agent here socially, and one of them also owns a bar. He invited me yesterday for a few drinks. So yeah, so it's kind of cool just being here. Also meet a lot of interesting guys as well. It's not all about chasing girls. And actually, the guys who do the best, they're not so obsessed with meeting the women normally in general. They're also just looking for better quality of life. So it means, meeting cool guys that you have some rapport with, similar interests. They can be a local, like this guy was yesterday I drank with, or my buddy here, because we know each other for a long time. Or they can be other foreigners live here. Also hang out with some cool foreigners. Someone who watched the channel, actually, two guys who are from the Antipodes. They're both Australian, I think, yeah. We'll probably hang out occasionally together as well. Matt asked me, have I seen more war widows from Ukraine? That's actually an interesting question, because I don't think women like that are going to be interested in marrying a foreigner. I don't see any of the matchmakers say, hey, we have Yulia here. Her husband was killed in the war. She wants to marry American and leave. Don't think that's going to really fly if your husband was killed in the war. I think they're going to be rather traumatized by it, obviously grieving, and I'm not even sure they would leave Ukraine, but I haven't seen anyone talk about that. Joe loves to say that they can't find good men, but the reality is, if they are traditional women, which, okay, I dispute whether they are. I mean, at a time of a national crisis, women with good values are going to flee to a matchmaker for immigration, be a green card woman, with the husband having lost his life in the war. Really? Wouldn't be the kind of values that I would consider particularly high if that were the case, and I don't see any evidence of that. So the reality is that for the women who stayed or is currently in Ukraine, the gender imbalance is not like in 2022. In 2022, there were mainly guys, single guys in Ukraine. There were not so many single women. Women were allowed to leave, as were men over 60, and obviously children. And that gender imbalance is reversed quite a lot. I would say it's pretty even when I go out and socialize in Ukraine, because, I mean, that's the best way I can judge it, because it's hard to know who's single, who's not, on the street during the day, but more likely if they're out in the evening, then they're single. It's pretty even. So I think someone else was saying it's a good time to go if you're single. I don't think you should go to Ukraine if the only reason is to meet women. I think that's ridiculous. There's a biggest war in Europe since World War II. And you're going to have rockets almost certainly hitting the city when you're there, where you are. So, I mean, I think you should have clearly a better reason to go. You can meet Ukrainian women, as I said, in Warsaw anyways, and Belarusians, and in Vilnius. And you could probably go to Germany and meet them socially just by, being out and about or going to Ukrainian events. As Dan said, he's going to meet them at the speed dating in Bucharest. But if you want to go and support the country, obviously if you're helping the humanitarian effort, I meet a lot of guys and women who are doing that from abroad, or if helping the military effort, defense of the country, of course, way more kudos for that. But even if you're not doing any of those things, you just want to go there and spend your money, help local businesses, have that multiplier effect on the economy, and show moral support, document it, keep Ukraine in the news, because especially since this war in Gaza, I think it's fallen down in the news cycle, because I think a lot more people are just more interested in that particular war, as horrific as it is as well. And I think that's the good reason to go. And you'll probably do well in the dating scene as well, because you'll have a reason to be there, probably a social circle that's relevant to that. And yeah, you won't be seen as a sex tourist, because if you show up with no reason to be there, yeah, and then you're going to be put Desperado Dan, we'll say, since Dan's on this. It begins with D, alliteration. Dan hasn't been to Ukraine during the invasion, to be clear. But if he were to go, then he would probably be put in that box. Yeah, so don't be like that. In general, you should have other reasons. You should be, like the guys who are going to do the best, the guys there's several things, spent the most time in the region. Genuine interest, learned the language. All these things are pushing up the rate of success hugely in terms of the quality of women, the more options they have, the better relationships. Yeah, that's the secret, and have a real reason. The two guys that are in the title to the video, they're agencies. They had reasons to be there. They ran matchmaking services, locally based businessmen. So that's the way to go. Have a reason to be there. Don't be. I mean, if you're a romance tourist, or I mean, a wife hunter, that's kind of the perception, I guess, in Ukraine, that then you lose her back home, you can't get women, whether it's true or not. Have a real reason to be there. I would say you don't have that prejudice here. I think they have a lot of tourists from Finland in Tallinn. So they have a little bit of maybe a slight negative connotation if you're Finnish. Maybe. I think it's minor. If you're a tourist. If you live here, no, obviously. But they don't have sex tourism here, so that doesn't seem to be a thing. I think it was an issue more than 10 years ago. When I say sex tourism, I mean actual sex tourism. Guys come in to smash hookers, pay for sex and all that stuff, or go to strip clubs, or the stag party, bachelor party scene, which is pretty seedy. They don't come here because it's too expensive anymore, so you don't see so much of that. Maybe more romance tourism, single guys hoping to meet the beautiful Estonian women, because, again, more models per capita than any other country in the world, including Ukraine, including Russia, including Belarus, including Moldova, including Kazakhstan, including Poland. It's here, right here. So yeah, there are a lot of guys who obviously have noticed that and come and are interested in the girls. But yeah, it doesn't seem like there's a negative connotation here. There's a lot more negative in Ukraine. And it wasn't quite as negative in Belarus, but there was a little bit of that in late 2019 and early 2020. And I can't speak to it as now. I'm obviously not going back on the current circumstances ever. And obviously I'm not going to Russia. That's clear. But yeah, you don't have that issue here. You can use English easier. The level is way higher. Even the Ukrainian girls who all live here all speak English that I've met pretty well. Matt asked me, how many foreign men do you know that married women in Ukraine that are still married? Oh, interesting question. We're talking about via matchmakers or not via matchmakers, because that's a very small sample. I have one consulting client who met a woman through Yelena. Again, the last interview I did with her is down below in the video description. And they're still married. They've been married for over 2 years now. I have one of my good friends in Odessa who's in many of my videos. He's not actually married, but he has 2 kids. He even had his second daughter was born in Odessa during this hot phase of the Russo-Ukrainian war. So I don't know. They didn't get married, but they have a long-term relationship. And they live as a couple with 2 kids. So I would just count that, because I think that's probably more what you're getting at, since they haven't split up. But again, and they've been together for over 5 years at this point. I've had a relationship for over 4 years, long term. Let me think. Who else? How many Ukrainian guys are married and still together? One of my other Italian friends is a businessman. He owns a lot of real estate in Odessa. Cool guy. I met up and had dinner with him when he was back in Odessa. He's with he's married, because he got married since the war began. I'm almost certain he's married, but he has a child with his partner at least. I'm just thinking of people I know socially. You know, one of my other friends, he broke up, but he didn't want to get married either. Just thinking in my social group who are foreigners. Another Italian friend is, he's never gotten married at all, and his relationships seem to end with Ukrainian women after a few months. And he's actually left now. He hangs out in Southeast Asia. So there you go. he picked probably the better spot for that. Let me see who else. One of the guys who replied here, but yeah, she's not Ukrainian. She's from the region, but she's not Ukrainian. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's not the best sample. My other clients who got married, one married a Belarusian. They're still together. One married a Ukrainian, still together as far as I know. I haven't spoken to him for a while though. Long-term relationship. Another one was with a Belarusian model. Last time I checked, they were still together. That's a few years. So yeah, pretty successful overall. In terms of that, in terms of finding a long-term partner. But some of the guys, that wasn't their main priority. Kind of happens. It wasn't like I was looking necessarily for a wife. I wasn't a wife hunter, but I ended up in a relationship anyways. Someone else says, pretty slim pickings. So can you elaborate what you mean? Any more questions, Matt? I've gone for over 2 hours. I definitely don't plan to discuss this topic for a long time again. We'll be back to discussing New Year's, this region, how to meet the 9s and 10s, which you would probably never have ever found at the matchmaker anyways, and less and less on online dating in general. Those you have to meet in person almost certainly, meeting all the time. Even with Instagram, cold writing, I guess if you're famous, it can work. But otherwise, pretty hard, and yeah, it's just so much easier. They're there in front of you here in real life. So that's what I'll say. Anyways, I'm going to wrap it up because it's been 2 hours, and I'm only going to have 90 minutes in the gym. So I won't even get to enjoy the sauna. Maybe I need to go. But yeah, I'll leave it at that. If you're watching this on replay, again, down below, lots of great links for you. Check out the playlist if you're new to this kind of content on my channel. For the Ukrainian buy business, where I have reaction videos and interviews. If you want to apply to invest in my premium service, which is up to a week with me in the region, there's lots of information, links down below in the description. It is my Insider czar experience. I'm known as the insider for the region, or the special forces, as someone else said here. And we will go to a city that we will discuss which is going to be the best fit for you, to explore, socialize with the creme de la creme of the city. You won't be on your own. You won't be Billy No Mates. You'll have access to my social circle. We'll go to the best places to socialize in. You'll meet beautiful women. They'll be there. There's no shortage of them. The 9s and 10s in this city, Tallinn, or if we go somewhere else, whether it's Vilnius or to Riga, where I'll be for New Year's with my clients. We're going to have an unbelievable party. I'm really looking forward to Riga New Year's. It's going to be crazy. It's going to be pretty mad. And yeah, it's just going to be leggy blondes galore. Could be Chisinau, Moldova. Or way over, just off the steppes of Central Asia, in Astana and Almaty. Especially if you like Asian women. Most beautiful Asian women, in my opinion, are from that region. It's actually really from Kazakhstan. It's a good bit of mixing. It's about 15% European descent, 85% Asian. And really great, amazing place, especially Almaty. It's an incredible city, just in terms of lots of other things like the nature nearby. People super friendly, cool place to hang out. And lots of friendly Kazakhstanis. So you can apply down below. In the description is a link to that, and there's more information there. And anything else I want to say at the end of this? Yeah, if you want to meet the beautiful women under 30, no kids, or less likely. I mean, you can obviously meet women who are over 30 and also have kids if you want, but if that's what your main interest is, with compatible values, then this part of the world, coming in person, whether you do it yourself, whether you do it with me, this is the best way to go. It worked for the two guys who pitch you the matchmaking that obviously I referenced in this video. So I'll leave you in a note. There's a very funny mockumentary called Screwed in Talon. It's from 1999, and it ridicules and parodies the romance tour business and the matchmaking business. And apparently in the late 90s, there were a lot of Swedish men who used to come on the romance tours here. And yeah, it's filmed, if you can find it with English subtitles, obviously. I wasn't able to find it with English subtitles. Maybe you can search around and send it to me, even if you find it. And I speak a little bit of Swedish, not really that much. And some of the dialogues in English and in Russian anyways in the film. So I was able to understand that part. But yeah, they used to have the same focus here. The beautiful, traditional Estonian brides. But why don't they do it anymore? Because the socioeconomic situation is not so desperate. They can emigrate to Western Europe, so places which are obviously doing a lot better. So they don't really need the matchmaking service to escape Estonia. The women, apparently just as beautiful, but they don't need the matchmaking. That whole business died completely, and the same will happen with Ukrainian bride business. That's still my prediction. As I said, most of it's pivoted to other regions, or they're just offering women who are from other countries, but using the Ukrainian brides brand. I guess so much money has been sunk into it already to create this image for guys. I mean, it's harder if you have to pump the money into Armenian brides. Like, good luck with that. I'm going to invest all this money and convince all these guys. So you already have, the sunk cost of that investment, I guess. So that's the only thing that surprised me in the last 2 years. Interesting to see their little spat back and forth and replying to each other, and really long video from Hard Rocket that anyways, I watched it so you don't have to. And yeah, it looks like a bit of a, the pie is getting smaller there with respect to pitching the Ukrainian brides, and it's probably not the future. And as I said, pretty interesting that Hard Rocket were in China. So I wonder why they were there, because as Antoine said, that's probably where the future is, pitching just Slavic women in general, but really Russian women probably to Chinese clients in the future, because of the gender imbalance they have there, because of like what's happened socially. And yeah, just the same. I guess the fetish for Chinese men may probably not about traditional brides, but the fact they're white. Yeah, it is what it is. So yeah, interesting to see, but yeah, I don't really want to have to sit through their videos. Again, as I said, I don't really learn anything. They don't seem to be even really up to date what goes on in Ukraine. They haven't been back here. They don't seem that interested in it, really, because they don't reference any of it. But maybe it's just because their client base doesn't want to hear it, because they probably are reading. They're probably listening to Colonel Coward Doug McGregor tell them that the Russians are winning every day, but then 3 years later they're not. So someone asked me what's my opinion about established agents like AFA. I'm pretty sure that Stryker from Hard Rocket used them, right? And that Luba used to work for them. Is that true? I'm almost certain that's the case. She says that she worked for a marriage agency. Interesting. I don't know much about him. Never met the owner. He's an American guy, right? I have lots of consultant clients come from all of these agencies who are unhappy. Very rare are they happy. The only guy is Ernest, really. And that's because he came to me before he used Match Guaranty and invested in my consulting. So maybe that's a sign about what to do before you use people. But I don't know. I don't think any of it is particularly, what to say. I have people come with complaints about all of these agencies. So if any of them are running pay-per-play, you have to pay for a paper letter, PPL. So if you have to pay for communication, I would advise stopping it. The incentives for them are not aligned with your incentives. They make money by you talking all the time. So if you are doing that, then please stop. If you need help stopping, invest in a consulting call, and I will persuade you in the consulting call to stop. If you can't, if you have some addiction problem. And probably that's all going to move to AI and virtual girlfriends at some point. I guess they probably have competition from that, the PPL sites in future. Yeah, that's all to say. So the moral of the story is do what these guys did. Don't do what they pitch if you want to have the optimum results. And I think even Joe says that himself, is that, yeah, moving to Ukraine was the best option. Obviously for him it was. So over paper letter. So that's what you should do. Is you move to this region. I think the Baltics is probably the best spot for guys who are high level because the level of beauty and just everything set up. But there isn't a big city. That's the big downside that you can go to safely because obviously going to Russia is not on the cards for most people with common sense or at the moment. So I'm going to leave it at that. Very long live stream. And I sacrificed a lot on the gym today, but I'll make up for it tomorrow. So Slava Ukraini, as I have written here. Usyk did the country proud last night in the boxing. And Horon Slava. Something you don't see them say on these Ukrainian matchmaking sites either, interestingly enough. They don't seem particularly patriotic as former migrants to Ukraine. Another interesting, maybe, soundbite to have at the end. So the guys who do the best, the guys who spend the most time, most invested in the culture, build local connections. Also, you can learn the language. Also going to help. A little less necessary here, as I said, in the Baltics, but definitely for Poland, definitely for Ukraine, it's going to be huge. And yeah, wish you all the best of luck. Hit me up for a consulting call if you want to dive deep into these issues. And if you want to come in person and live an unforgettable up to a week with me, partying hard, meeting the 9s and 10s, then the Zara experience, the in-person experience down below is the application form. And I may be seeing you, like with my 3 clients who are coming in the next 10 days in Tallinn and Riga. So, do pobачення, and see you sometime soon. Probably the next live stream will actually be in Ukraine. I'm not really planning to do one before then unless something else comes up on this channel. So, bid you a pleasant evening from Tallinn in Estonia.